Hello, I'm Barbara Harrelson. We're here in downtown Santa Fe near the historic Plaza and the Palace of the Governors, which is the oldest public building in the United States. Santa Fe is the oldest capital in the United States, and it's been here for more than 400 years. It's got lots of stories to tell, and I have been conducting a literary walking tour of Santa Fe since 1996. So I'd love for you to join me to hear some Santa Fe stories. We're starting on the Plaza in downtown Santa Fe because this is the heart of Santa Fe today, as it has been from the very beginning of its founding. And this is where community events still happen. This is where traditional Christmas pageants take place in Santa Fe today, as they have for the last couple of centuries. And this is also where the first American Revolution took place, the Pueblo Revolt of 1680. I have a book here that some of you may want to read. It's called Pope, Leader of the First American Revolution, by Native American writers Joe Sando and Herman Agoyo. And this was an important event, not only in Santa Fe's history, but in the history of the nation, because this was the first successful uprising by Native peoples against a European conqueror. And the Pueblo peoples joined together and forced the Spanish out of Santa Fe into exile 300 miles south of here, where they stayed for the next 13 years. Our history and culture is so rich because of the three dominant culture groups that have influenced it, starting with the Native peoples and their very strong oral storytelling tradition. Before there were books and alphabets for them to write down their stories, they danced their stories, they did rock art, they told their stories through their families and passed them down from generations to generations. And even today, the Native peoples believe that the most sacred stories should only be passed down by word of mouth. Another important influence on our literature and our culture, of course, are the Spanish, who ruled in Santa Fe for more than 2 centuries. And the first piece of literature to emerge from this era was actually written by a Spanish officer who came here with the conquistadores, and it is his first-hand account of the settling of this country, this part of the world, and some of his famous battles. His name was Don Gaspar Perez de Villagra, and the title of the epic poem that he wrote was La Historia de Nueva Mexico, which simply means the history of New Mexico. It is the earliest first-hand account, and it was published in Madrid in 1610. The original copy is here in our history library that is part of the Museum of New Mexico. Now, the third dominant culture are the Americans who came here. Remember, Santa Fe was Spanish for more than 200 years. Then for 25 years, we were a part of Mexico. And then after the United States fought a war with Mexico, we became a U.S. territory. And the Santa Fe Trail opened, bringing in Americans, or the first quote-unquote white men, into this part of the world. And so the impressions of some of those early traders and settlers who came across the Santa Fe Trail are an important part of our literature, because they recorded their experiences and their impressions of Santa Fe, the old royal city. And many of them could not believe that a royal city had houses made of mud. There was a little bit of culture shock. Others took to the exotic feel of the place and the beautiful mountain setting right away. And that is true even today. Santa Fe inspires strong emotions. For example, a man named Chris Wilson, who is an architectural historian at the University of New Mexico, wrote a book not too long ago called The Myth of Santa Fe, in which he documents the evolution of Santa Fe style and why the city fathers decided that we needed to freeze the Santa Fe look to an earlier time in order to attract tourism. And why does he feel that that's not necessarily been an advantage for Santa Fe's culture, and certainly not to advance authentic indigenous architecture. A famous novel was written in the latter part of the 19th century that is still in print today. has nothing at all to do with New Mexico. It was an accident of chance that the author was General Lew Wallace, who wrote Ben-Hur, A Tale of the Christ. The last few chapters were written here in the Palace of the Governors in Santa Fe, New Mexico, because General Lew Wallace had been called upon by the President of the United States to come here and serve as territorial governor and try to resolve the Lincoln County War and some of the other problems in this very wild territory. I mean, gun battles were taking place over, and land grabs were taking place all over New Mexico. It was a really wild west. But while he was here, he had to grapple with Billy the Kid. And Billy the Kid is a real life historical character who has inspired probably more writing, fiction and nonfiction, than anyone else in New Mexico's history. Some of the letters that Billy the Kid wrote to General Lew Wallace, asking him to honor the offer of a pardon, which Billy the Kid said that the governor reneged on. Some of those letters are in our history library, and what surprised me, they've only been acquired in the last few years. What surprised me is that Billy the Kid was literate and that his handwriting was pretty good. But the legends about Billy go on and on and on. The man who killed Billy the Kid, Pat Garrett, wrote his story called The Autobiography of Billy the Kid. And then one of the world's foremost living Billy the Kid experts, Frederick Nolan, and he has annotated that book. So there's plenty of literature out there, fiction and nonfiction, if you want to find out what you think about Billy the Kid. Well, we're near the famous Santa Fe Cathedral, the Cathedral Basilica of St. Francis, who is the patron saint of Santa Fe. And Santa Fe actually means holy faith. So, and there are lots of stories about Santa Fe and its spirituality. But one of the most famous is the Willa Cather novel, Death Comes for the Archbishop, which is historical fiction based on the real-life Archbishop Lamy, who came to Santa Fe in 1850, first as Santa Fe's first bishop and later first archbishop. And Lamy was sent here to make reforms, and he subsequently ended up excommunicating some of the more popular Hispanic priests in northern New Mexico. A famous book about the same man and the same era was written by the late Paul Horgan, and it won the Pulitzer Prize for biography, and it is called Lamy of Santa Fe, His Life and Times. And that's a book that should be read side by side along with Cather's novel. We're here at 109 East Palace, which is the name of a storefront. It's also the name of a book, a nonfiction book written by Janae Conant, which tells the backstory, if you will, some of the personal stories of the scientists who came here to work on the Manhattan Project during World War II to build the atomic bomb. Robert Oppenheimer, whom had been selected to lead the project from the scientific point of view. And Oppenheimer knew New Mexico and knew that secluded plateau because he had come here as a boy and spent summers at the ranch school at Los Alamos. And he thought that would be the perfect place to do this secret project. These very well-respected and educated scientists who had fled Nazi and fascist Europe, and they were recruited to work on this project. So they rode the train out here. They were met at the station and driven into town, and they would have checked in at this store, which was supposed to look like just a regular tourist store in Santa Fe. But it was operated by a woman named Dorothy McKibben that Oppenheimer personally had recruited. And she processed their papers and gave them instructions. They would be going up to Los Alamos, and which was guarded and with a secure perimeter, that they wouldn't be coming back to Santa Fe that often, but if they did come, that they were to use not their own names, make up some kind of a name, and not say very much at all because they all spoke with thick European accents. So they managed to build the bomb and helped end the war earlier. But they definitely had an impact on Santa Fe. There were rumors about spies, about nuclear secrets being traded to the Russians, And we know now that that was done here in Santa Fe. Another book that is very close to my heart I want to tell you about. It's an older book, but it too is nonfiction. It is The House at Ottawee Bridge, written by Peggy Pond Church. It is a more important book and a more representative book in terms of taking in lots of aspects of New Mexico's history and culture, how we are a land of stark contrasts and contradictions in the old and the new. And so that's why I think The House at Ottawee Bridge addresses all those issues. More than, for example, 109 East Palace, which is very specifically about the project and the people who were involved in it. So if we've whetted your appetite to learn more about Santa Fe and New Mexico and its literary heritage, then I am so delighted to have been able to take you on just a few stops and to just touch on a few of the important works of literature, and hope that it will prompt you to explore more on your own.